The first keynote will be delivered in tandem by two speakers, by Dr. Luca Zampaglione and Dr. Kieran Carolan from the European Agency for the Operational Management of Large-Scale IT Systems, or in short, EU-LISA. This agency is located actually here in Tallinn, and since it is managing large informational systems or databases that are processing personal data, then EU-LISA and its databases are actually a great example of possibly vulnerable critical infrastructure. And I first thought this would only cover 28 nations as all the EU members, but I actually learned from the speakers that the number can be at times be much higher. So thank you very much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Luca Zampaglione. I'm the head of security of EU-LISA. Actually, we now split our presentation into parts. The first part will touch more the provider topic, and my colleague Kieran will talk more about the innovator perspectives. Just to give now a small preamble, why do we exist? We exist because more than 20 years ago, a set of European member states decided through an agreement called the Schengen Agreement to give free movement to European citizens, including goods, individuals, information and currency within the same visa policy. So, in order to do so, a framework had to be built accordingly, and this framework comprised several key components. But first, of course, is the removal of checks on persons at the internal borders. At the same time, becoming a unique free area of circulation, the borders that were not existing anymore within the territory had to be managed in a more common way from the outside. So for this reason, the Schengen member states harmonized the conditions of entry and on the rules of visas for short stays. The reason why they also tended to have a better harmonization was to avoid the visa shopping, for the reason that being a free territory where to circulate, it was better to give a better control on the borders, actually, so to improve borders management. It goes without saying that without internal borders, police cooperation had to be increased at a higher level. So compared to the former national way to operate, police officers had to think more internationally, so a better cooperation with the police forces was put in place. Again, it goes without saying that the best enabler of security, what could be achieved definitely with the use of technologies. So, two large-scale IT systems were put in place, one for visa management and one for the management of police alerts. So a second generation system, Schengen Information System, is now put in place, starting from 2 years, and actually the first one was put in place roughly in 1997. And the Schengen Information System, the Visa Information System, actually enable the freedom of the circulation of people in Europe in a secure way. A European agency for the operational management of large-scale IT systems in the area of freedom, security, and justice, this is literally what's foreseen in the European regulation that gave life to our agency, has been created and was born actually 2.5 years ago. So we are in a kind of the startup phase. And the name of the agency is abbreviated to EU LISA. This agency is a child of the European Commission, and we are part of a family of Justice and Home Affairs agencies comprising CEPOL, comprising EASO, comprising Eurojust, Europol, FRA for the fundamental rights, and Frontex for the management of the European borders. And this year, EU LISA has the chairmanship of a network of those JHA's agencies. What do we do? As anticipated, we are IT service providers. And we are a child of a commission, so we are a public sector. We are not private. And we operate 3 large-scale IT systems. As anticipated, the first one is the Schengen Information System, where in 2014 we processed approximately 60 million alerts that are actually input and managed directly by the law enforcement agencies of the member states. We manage the business of information system that for the moment is rolled out with a coverage of 30% of the world. And in 2014, the system registered 5.6 million applications, roughly, for visas. Eurodac is the third large-scale system that we operate. It is done for the control of the asylum seekers that try to, when they enter into Europe, they ask for asylum. And in order to have a control over the asylum seekers, because they might ask the same asylum request to different European states, there is an IT system that compares the fingerprints of the asylum seekers in order to assure that the identity of those persons and to guarantee that only one member state can process that request. Fourth is an extremely important element for the success of the services that we provide to the member states is the communications infrastructure. That is the wide area network that connects our central systems that are located in Strasbourg and in Austria, in St. Johann in Pongau, to the national networks. So there is a cascade. So we have, where are we actually? We have our operations run 24/7 in Strasbourg, in Austria, with 2 bunkers, where we have the data centers. Actually, one of the 2 is anti-atomic as well. And the 2 data centers are resilient. They are put on purpose at geographical distance, because in case of even natural disaster, the second one can take over all the services that are needed, and automatically there is a switch to the member states' networks. We are here in Tallinn with our headquarters, and so the reason why the agency is located in 3 different places, geographical places actually far from each other, is to guarantee business continuity and disaster recovery. And we have also a liaison office in Brussels. At CyCon, we discussed about distributed architectures. This slide just to let you understand how we are architectured. As mentioned before, the Business Information System will have soon a worldwide coverage. The Schengen Information System 2 covers already 33 entities, including Europol and Eurojust. Eurodac has a similar coverage, plus we have an internal network that is the only one connected to the internet. In fact, the 3 large-scale systems, the central systems are not connected to the internet at all, because we have to adopt the so-called risk avoidance. Cybersecurity is a legal obligation, and security is by design in our large-scale systems. Why? Because we are set up thanks to the adoption of EU regulations by the European Parliament. So we exist by European law. And regulations are actually laws that are immediately enforced at member state level without the need to be translated into national legislation. So there is the legal base for the agency, and there is one legal base per each large-scale IT system. And de facto, the agency is a critical infrastructure of the European Union. I say de facto because it is not foreseen by law that European institutions can be critical infrastructures. But de facto it is, for the reason that in our establishing regulation and also in the large-scale IT systems regulation, there is a list of security requirements that have to be put in place. So for this reason as well, there is a strong security governance, very strong, because it is there by law. In fact, in our establishing regulation, there is depicted how the agency is organized, also in terms of security, and in order to be compliant with the law, actually we have to adopt a structured risk management process at corporate level and also at security level. And the reason that we are young, relatively young, because we were born 2.5 years ago, actually helps to build ourselves in the right direction. Plus, we provide high focus on security, personal data protection, and regarding this last topic, personal data protection is fundamental for the protection of the information that we process, because we process biometric information and personal data. Outreach in cybersecurity. Partnership is a winning factor. We have a partnership with the member states. We have partnership also with the industry. On that, my colleague Kieran will say something more about that. And I just go straight to the last bullet. That is quite important, at least for myself, because being responsible for the security of the agency, we recently established a network called the Security Officers Network, SON, not very original name, but it's okay. And this network is a kind of friendship network where we, with the colleagues, security officers of the national systems, of the systems that we operate, that way we establish trust. And with them, we exchange security best practices, and actually it is a very good example of EU cooperation in cybersecurity matters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luca. So if I may continue, my name is Kieran Carolyn. I'm the Research and Development Officer of EU-LISA. And today I want to bring you just a few short words about the innovator perspective, continuing on from what Luca just introduced to you there. What do I want to bring you as a message in summary is essentially a belief, personal belief, and also a belief in the agency that operational agencies like ourselves operating critical infrastructure as a provider of systems that are important for security, but also themselves have to be secure, can also be important contributors to the overall discourse on cybersecurity. And what I want to bring you, the message in the next slides, is exactly how this can be done. Just as a matter of introduction, and in order to put a bit of a framework, a bit of an overall outline on my presentation, I'm going to go back to the European Agenda on Security, which was already spoken about in this conference previous days. So in that agenda, there are 3 overarching priorities. 2 of these, tackling terrorism and disrupting organized crime, I think Luca has already covered quite well. They are essentially, in the EU-LISA sense at least, covered by the systems that we run, the systems that we provide, principally the Schengen Information System, second version. There should be on that slide, though it's missing, a 3rd priority, and the 3rd priority is fighting cybercrime. And what I'm really going to focus on in this presentation is this 3rd priority. How can EU-LISA, as an operational agency, how can any operational agency like ourselves really contribute to the fight against cybercrime? Well, First of all, it's not so much cybercrime, it's cybersecurity. And what I'm really referring to is cybersecurity here. But cybersecurity is obviously the first line of defense in cybercrime. If our systems themselves are not secure, they're going to be very, very vulnerable to cybercrime. So EULISA, in the overall discourse on cybercrime, it's really cybersecurity I'm talking about. So that's just an initial point. And in this cybersecurity strategy of the European Union, which was released in 2014, as already mentioned, there's several things mentioned. I've just outlined 3 of those as important contributors to overall cybersecurity in Europe and indeed beyond. Capacity building is one of these, cooperation with the private sector and academia is another, and research and development is another. And what I want to bring you is one slide on each of these strategic elements and precisely how an operational agency like ours can contribute in these fields. So capacity building was the first of these. And what I've basically done is tell you what we do and give you my experiences on what we do and what we have done so far, and some more personal reflections at the bottom in each slide on what I feel, or colleagues of mine feel, might still be needed in the overall field of cybersecurity, at least from our point of view. So what we are doing in terms of capacity building, we are working very, very hard on agreeing security standards and, of course, cooperating in their implementation. This is what we're doing with the 3 large-scale IT systems that Luca mentioned. When we work with our partners at member state level and at agency level, in the case of Europol and Eurojust, we are agreeing practical measures that must be implemented. And we are working on implementing these and seeing what results we get, and this is knowledge that we can spread, and indeed we do spread. We're enhancing organizational and operational capabilities, particularly directed towards critical infrastructure, as already explained. Training is a core activity of our agency. We are supporting training and upskilling at member state level. This includes, though it's not the only thing, security training. The Security Officers Network would be one vehicle by which this is achieved, but there are others, pure training organizational measures out there. And lastly, we're cooperating, I mentioned, with Europol and Eurojust in the sense of our systems, but we're actually working with all of the Justice and Home Affairs agencies out there, and indeed other agencies such as ENISA, who are not in the Justice and Home Affairs umbrella, but nonetheless are very, very relevant in our field. Working with them, implementing working arrangements that include things like exchange of information, like research and development. All these matters are typically in the working arrangements that we put in place. And these are the foundations which we have already put in place for cooperation, which, as I'll explain later, is very, very important. What I feel is still needed in terms of capacity building at the European level, at least, perhaps it's different elsewhere, but at least at the European level, is policies to support best practices on the operational side. And this fundamentally, if this is the one take-home message from this presentation, is what I feel I want to say to you is that in the operational side, somebody like EULISA has a lot of expertise and gains a lot of knowledge on the operational side that really should be a contributor to the overall discussion, the overall discourse on cybersecurity. So it's very, very important in the whole cybersecurity field that operational entities like ourselves have a voice. One other element that's somewhat missing, and something that EULISA is definitely trying to bring at the European level, is security certification frameworks, global standards on interoperability, data protection requirement adherence, etc. All of these things are perhaps there to an extent, but not there to the extent that we would like them to be, and we're trying to develop this, and we will do that over the coming years. In terms of how we adapt this knowledge, this is just an extra slide I've put in, and this is a typical workflow of if we have a solution that we want to implement in our systems, whether it be a security solution or otherwise. How do we bring this advance, this evolution to our large-scale IT systems? Well, typically we do a proof of concept on a small, isolated machine. And following that, we have dedicated testing environments for all 3 of our systems. And only after an initial proof of concept will we deploy the solutions in the testing environments. Subsequently, all going well, of course, we will roll them out to the large-scale IT systems. In this whole 3-phase procedure, I think you can agree and state that we're going to learn a lot about how solutions, practical solutions, available solutions out there work in systems that, as Luca already introduced, are extremely complex architecturally, have multiple users, and we're learning a lot of information that should be input that we do share with others, and indeed we want to share, just as examples of types of solutions that we would be implementing. They'd be associated with public key infrastructure systems, identity access management, cryptography, tools for internal security assurance. These are just examples. There'd be many more, but just to give you a flavor of the types of knowledge that we would have that we're willing and able to share. Second element of the cybersecurity strategy, which was referenced and where an agency like ourselves is definitely playing a role, is in the engagement of industry and academia. Public-private partnership has been mentioned several times in this conference, something we take seriously ourselves. We feel we can really bring something to the European discussion on cybersecurity and other fields by engaging the industry and the academia. We're already doing that and we want to upscale this. How we're doing it, we organize industry roundtables. This year there will be 2, one of which is on IT, including cybersecurity. We find these events very, very important, very, very useful to exchange information in 2 directions. One, so that we can tell the industry what we want, what we need, so they can work developing in the right direction. And 2, they can tell us what they have and influence our decision-making, of course, in a fair and transparent manner, and that's why it's a roundtable event, to actually tell us how we should be advancing our critical infrastructure. We're working with other public-private partnerships, such as this platform, and we're also quite recently becoming involved in joint projects with public entities and with private entities, typically under the Horizon 2020 program at the moment. It could be under other funding vehicles. But again, working closely with these entities on projects builds trust, builds a familiarity, builds a knowledge. And this is somewhat outside of our typical mandate, but something that we're doing and taking very, very seriously because we think this industry and academia partnership is crucial. When we have these industry roundtable events, one of the things that they always tell us is we need to meet you more. You're an operational agency, we're working in our silo, you're working over there in your silo. We don't talk enough, we don't know what you need. So this is what I've stated as the first point. What's still needed is more interaction and more communication between people like us and people like the industry and academia to really state our needs and communicate our needs. We need more inducements to ensure that products, whether they're security products or products that are rolled out to our system for any particular functionality, are secure. I spoke about certification frameworks. That could be one, but there could be financial, legislative, other inducements. And general awareness raising is something that we get involved in ESA, of course, gets involved in, European Commission gets involved in, but just to state that we are doing a lot of it, but still more is needed in this overall field, I would say. The last point within the strategy, again, where we're playing a role in the whole cybersecurity discourse, is technological developments. How do we update or how do we keep in touch with technological developments? Well, it sounds very limited, but desk study is the first point I've put up there. This is principally my job, looking at all the technology out there and seeing what's available in the field. It is primitive, but I'm sorry to say that's fundamentally a lot of what we're doing at the moment, reading, discussing amongst the colleagues and seeing what should work. Obviously, this should improve, but right now this is one of the main vehicles by which we're getting cybersecurity knowledge. Innovation, research and development, security research projects I mentioned, and otherwise information exchange with stakeholders globally. At the moment, we have a good network in Europe. I referenced that already. I think the agency believes that a more wide interaction with stakeholders globally is probably merited, and I think stakeholders globally can tell us information, we can also provide information to them, and this mutual exchange will be important. One thing in terms of research and development that I'll mention, it's a particular point of my own in terms of Horizon 2020. There's a whole lot of research going on out there, research projects, industry, academia, etc. A lot of good work, I believe, and we simply do not have access to the results. They're typically only shared amongst project partners. This is something that I'm not necessarily saying can be changed amongst the forum here, but it's something that is a problem, and it's a development that will be, that is needed. So I'm going to leave you with a final slide just in all of our work under the 3 elements that I introduced. What are the typical things that I'm seeing, that the agency is seeing, are important trends in the overall security, cybersecurity field? Just more personal impressions than anything, but just a couple of points to leave you with. Number 1 is consolidation is very, very important. It's crucial for efficiency, of course. It's also crucial for security. EULISA as an agency is testament to this. We are pooling, or Europe is pooling, All the systems under the management of a single entity who has the professionalism and the expertise to actually deliver these systems efficiently and securely. And this type of consolidation at the governmental level is something Europe has moved to. Of course, I think it's a very, very important thing, but it is certainly a trend that's going on. Knowledge sharing, I touched on that several times in the presentation, is extremely important. We're working on it already and we want to expand. Identity management is one area where EULISA is working very, very hard and has to work very, very hard. As Luca introduced, we have so many users out there. I tried to put a figure on it in the introduction just before we started. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of end users, I don't know, but a lot. To manage all of these, to have traceability about who carried out what actions is important from security, it's important for data protection. How can we manage the identities, be sure that only the proper users are using these systems, and that we have traceability about who did what action if we need to trace back. Something we do, for example, in Schengen Information System has to be done. We have a lot of knowledge, and it's something we could talk about with stakeholders later. Finally, I didn't mention in the Luca didn't mention in one of our systems, there is talk that at some point our systems will have to interface with the public internet. It's not done yet, but at some point may be done. This will bring a whole host of new challenges, something we're going to have to cope with, but it's also something we're going to learn from if and when this has to be done. Public internet is pervading everything nowadays, demands more security once we open our systems up, but these are the types of problems and challenges we're going to have to face into the future. So that's all. I would be happy to take questions now. Luca, I believe, would be happy to take questions. Otherwise, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your great presentation, and especially for being honest about the challenges that you're facing. Do we have any questions from the floor? Everything seems to be very clear what you have just said. Or do I see some hands? Well, if not, I will ask the first question myself. So you mentioned all these different databases and the amounts of data that you're processing. Have you seen, or can you comment on some of the attacks or incidents that you have been faced with, or you're all very, very secure?
I think that would be more your...
Yeah. Well, yeah. Without disclosing any sensitive information, yes, we are under attack. It is, if I would say no, I would lie, and you wouldn't even trust what I say. Now, yes, we are under attack. It is known. Actually, we use a risk-based approach. So we do risk assessments, looking at the threats that can be coming from outside, but also from inside. So we know the famous Snowden case, and we know that all our staff has a security clearance, especially the people working in Strasbourg have a security clearance up to EU secret level. But nevertheless, this doesn't guarantee 100% that the threat is over. So our approach is definitely based on risk assessment and considering all the family of non-threats to IT systems, especially the ones that are relevant to an agency like ours, where we operate 24/7 criminal databases, biometrics, and actually personal data at 360 degrees. Risk assessment has to be very, very, very accurate. And as I said, we have incidents, so we try to respond to them in the most appropriate way.
Thank you. Any more questions? If not, then thank you very much for coming over from the other side of Tallinn. And
we are at 50 meters from here.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you.